Potters, are you looking for high-quality equipment and supplies? Since 1974, Bailey Pottery Equipment, based in Kingston, New York, has produced equipment used in schools, universities, and art centers nationwide. Their gas kilns, renowned for ease of use, fuel efficiency, and beautiful results, are a global favorite. Bailey Pottery Equipment caters to all skill levels, offering a range of equipment and top brand ceramic supplies at discounted prices, all backed by their outstanding personal service. Visit BaileyPottery.com, the professional's choice for all things clay.
Hello, my name is Kathy King, and welcome to the For Flux Sake Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Harvard Ceramics program in our fair city, Allston, Massachusetts. I'm here with Rose and Matt Katz of the world-famous Ceramic Materials Workshop, and they are ready to answer your burning questions about clay and glaze. Howdy, Matt and Rose.
Hi, Kathy.
Howdy.
Hello. It's good to see you both.
Oh, it's fantastic to see you.
Oh, I know what I would like to start talking about before we get to our fabulous listener questions.
Ooh.
I had somebody ask me about what the recommended textbook for someone learning ceramics should be. And I thought it was really interesting because I don't quite have the answer. So I thought I'd pick your brains. I mean, I know when I was a clay baby in, a million years ago, before the interwebs, we had, Daniel Rhodes's Clay and Glazes for the Potter, or Hands in Clay. And it was like so fascinating to be taking like your first clay class, and you had to buy this book. It was required. But to think like that everyone in the class was looking and limited to looking at, say, the same images, getting the same information. And I wondered, have you heard of what people use nowadays, if they use anything at all?
I mean, that's the weird one is if people are using anything at all. And I know there's been a lot, like academically, there's been a lot of change with the way textbooks go and sort of the prices and a lot more renting and digital renting of textbooks that goes on. But ceramics has never had like a textbook. Like, I think there's always been like that teacher's favorite book. Like when I was a student, the throwing book we had was a potter named Clary Illian. But I think that's because my teacher liked Clary Illian's book. And like it was a good book about throwing, but I don't know how many other people used it.
I mean, I always had Val's handbook. That was the textbook that they told us to buy.
Spiral bound.
Yeah, like go to Kinfolk, go get your copy.
You know it's good if it's only spiral bound.
but that's an interesting contrast too, because then it's sort of the question of more sort of informational. Like, just like Cushing's is a great book, but like it's just like basically straight information, and it's such like spurts of information. Like none of them are very thorough about anything. And like, let's be like, a lot of people are using it for the collection of glaze recipes in the back, or like his firing profile or stuff like that. But like about throwing, I mean, the weird one I guess I've noticed has been like sort of post-pandemic of how many people have come into ceramics and how they were accessing information, I guess, because of the pandemic.
Well, yeah, there was something nice about having the one textbook, because I remember, there'd be a section about clays and what are clays and what's the difference between a slip and an engobe. And, then it would be about glazes and then construction methods. So like everything was in one place, and perhaps it wasn't all completely correct, or maybe it changes over time, whatnot. But it was nice as a starting point. And I think, now because people have access to so much information, it kind of makes sense that there are great books that are more specific, like Ben Carter's Mastering the Potter's Wheel or the Mastering Hand Building book. Maybe people are just getting more information about one lane of ceramics than another.
I think a lot of books have gone very specific. and that there's not a general overview thing so much anymore because, it's the same way of like, a lot of people are learning their throwing from YouTube or from Instagram or any of those types of things, so that more people who want to know about throwing can like get Ben's book or want to know about it. Like from a technical side, like there's stuff like the encyclopedia, or the Potter's Dictionary, the Hammer and Hammer book. But it's good, but it's literally like, an old style like dictionary, like literally, here's a paragraph on that one subject.
Yeah, but I think to encompass everything is just, it's a huge book.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's too much nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a big coffee table book.
Yeah. Well, but we've been talking about that with our online classes, because we've been talking to some of our longtime students, and we were sort of talking about, as we think about the way we write as we continue to make things, of that there are sort of two philosophies. One is micro targeting, little tiny things on little tiny subjects, or literally overwhelming amounts of information. And it's a really difficult contrast as an author to be able to sort of pick which one it should be, because I think everybody always wants to go for overwhelming amounts of information, but it's
overwhelming.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, right. What was your first like glaze calc book? Because mine was that McKee ceramics handbook, a guide to glaze calculation materials and processes.
That
was hard.
Yeah, that was mine too. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
I know I'm never gonna do this. If only they put glazes in bottles that I could buy. Well, wait. Now they do.
Mine was Clay and Glazes for the Potter by Rhodes, and it's still my favorite book. A lot of the information is dated, but like from an informational standpoint, from a technical laying out the basis standpoint, like it's really, really good.
Yeah.
That's
and like I said, like I love Cushing. Cushing was always a great resource at Alfred, but it is so bits and pieces that Rhodes was a narrative, at least is where it's going. And let's be clear, anyone who goes out there and buys it, to be clear, I didn't understand a single thing the first time I read it.
Oh, that makes me feel better. Okay. What is this gobbledygook?
Like, yeah, sure, I understand that. Let's move on.
Yes. Silicate bomb.
Right.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. Well, all right. Well, I think that's interesting. I'd be curious to hear from our listeners if there's a book that really has made a big difference, in their journey into clay.
What the young people are reading.
Yeah, what are the kids reading? That's what I need to know.
Dragons and pottery.
Now there you go. Oh my goodness, that'd be awesome. Dungeons and Dragons and pottery. I know that is done out there, and that is cool. All right, so we have a lot of questions, so let's get to it, you two. Our first question comes from Carol McGinnis. Not sure where Carol's from because she's keeping it a secret, but she wrote and said, my local ceramic shop only has one clay body with an absorption rate below 0.5%. Since shipping clay can be pricey, are there any adjustments I can make to my existing clay to decrease its water absorption after firing? This has been a thing now that people are listening to us or to you, to you too.
All of us. Let's all take the blame together.
Exactly. No, I mean, absorption rates are in the people want to be in the know.
Well, I guess my question is, she says that the absorption rate that she's getting from the company is 0.5%. What is she getting in her studio?
Has she tested it? Yeah.
Question.
Test.
That is really one of the catches. That's why we've been doing our commercial clay profiling, because the boxes all do say you have to test it yourself. And I mean, it's a bit of a convenient out for the clay companies. Whether or not, and if they say 0.5%, I generally found that that's not far off. It may not be completely dead on accurate, but it'll generally be pretty close. Can be a little bit higher, a little bit lower.
Yeah, from the things that we profiled so far. Yeah, it's pretty close.
But as to the actual question, no, not a single thing. You're doomed.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate to say you're doomed, but you just don't know what's in it. So you don't even know where to start. So there's like, you're just shooting in the dark, and then you can make things better, or you could make things way worse.
Way worse. And that's a big problem of if you don't know how much feldspar or what else they're putting into it. Like I know a lot of clay bodies, they'll slip some talc in there or some molassinite. And those can be really crazy powerful fluxes if you don't know how much is in there and how it's going to affect it. To make things worse, the other reason why you really can't do it is the mixing. Oh boy, the mixing. I know. And here's where Matt comes in as Matt the Bummer.
Oh, is this a new character of the show? Great.
Ooh, Lord Celsius and Matt the Bummer.
Yeah.
I've always been here. When you try to wedge something into your clay body, that is just about the absolute worst way to mix something. Our clay, like literally a pound of clay, just like a pound, half a kilo of clay, has got billions and billions and billions of particles in it. And part of clay performing well is that the feldspar needs to be evenly distributed with the clay particles, with the quartz, with the grog, with whatever's in that clay. It all needs to be homogenized. Now, to really ruffle some feathers, a lot of the clay companies aren't mixing it all that well to begin with anyway. And that's a longer story about how clay is mixed for art clay versus the entire rest of the world. But when you are trying to wedge in something, you are never going to homogenize that material in. It might disappear, you might not see it, but that doesn't mean it's working microscopically. It does not mean it's mixed and homogenized and even. And what that means is you'll get inconsistent fluxing, or you'll get bloating, or you'll get pockets of material. I see that a lot from people where they'll come in and be like, all of a sudden I got all these little bubbles on the surface, and they're like in ribbons. You can sometimes see them. It's like something either wasn't mixed in the first place, or they tried to wedge something in and it didn't homogenize. And you can wedge it for days and days and days, and it will never be good enough to get an actual homogeneous mix. So it's a tough one. That finding those high quality clays, it's part of why we're doing the clay profiling, to let people see it. But what is available is oftentimes what we have available is the bummer part.
But I mean, still, mixing something or wedging in something like grog, or, every once in a while put some malachite into my porcelain. If I'm,
that's a different
coiling.
story, because
that's a different story, because you can see it, like you can feel it and see it.
They're bigger particles than a powder would be.
Sure.
So they're going to mix in easier.
They're also not there for the melting. And when we're talking about the melting in the vitrification, that has to be even. If that takes place unevenly, that's just going to create so many problems. It'll even create application problems, because you'll have different absorption rates in your bisqueware, and you'll literally get glaze sticking better parts than other parts of the same body because of that clay not being mixed well. So with grogs, it's okay. You want to wedge some kitty litter into your clay, knock yourself out.
Chicken grit.
That's a thing. Granny grit, absolutely. What's the term? Oh, it's such a great term. Is it gastrolith? Gastrolith.
Yeah, it's a gastrolith.
What the heck's that? What's that?
Chicken stones.
Really? Yeah. That's another name for it?
Yeah, that's the actual name. For people who don't know what we're talking about. So there is a product that you can get in the States. One of them here is called Granny Grit, GRAN-I-GRIT. And it is chicken stones. And what they are is that they are rocks that you feed to a chicken, because chickens, fun fact, don't have teeth.
No kidding.
And so they eat rocks to process food in their stomachs. It literally acts like a rock tumbler, like a ball mill. And what this granny grit is actually feldspar chips. So a lot of people who want like melty chunks in their clay body will buy granny grit and wedge it into their clay. Let's be clear, you literally get melting chunks of feldspar. This is not something to do
Yeah, like
practically.
glass chunks in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, gastroliths. All right, stomach stones. Stomach stones.
Yay.
God, I need some. I got teeth, not enough to keep up though. All right. Well, let us move on to our next question from Tori Solis from Texas. And Tori has a question also about clays.
Hello, Matt, Rose, and Kathy. This is Tori Solis of Blue Nose Trading out of Texas. I recently bought 1,000 pounds of a clay made in-house by my local clay store, and I suspect that there were adjustments made to the clay recipe. I noticed two things. Some of my glazes that used to craze on this body no longer do, which is great. But more frustratingly, some of my matte glazes now blister on this body. My question is, where can I start to make adjustments to my Cone 6 matte glaze recipe to stabilize it again, if that's possible? Thank you so much for the podcast. It's always a joy to learn from you.
Oh.
1,000 pounds. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
daunting.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
This is why the clay companies say you should test each batch.
well, it's even more infuriating because I completely believe her that they changed something and they don't tell you what and they don't tell you how and they just assume that you're just going to deal with it.
Or it's not even them changing things. They could be using the same amount of things. Their weighing sucks.
Well,
Like,
they don't
A
weigh.
bag. Yeah, exactly. They don't weigh. So like your recipe may say, oh, it takes 28 pounds. They're dumping the whole freaking bag in. They don't care.
Yeah, well, we should say that for those of you who don't know, the way most clay companies batch is that they have a 1 ton recipe, and most mixers will hold about a ton. And when they go to their stocks and they pull 50-pound bags, because in states it's 50 pounds, they pull 50-pound bags and they'll generally round those numbers. So if your recipe calls for 40 pounds of feldspar, they'll just throw a 50-pound bag in there. And if it calls for, 110 pounds of clay, they'll throw 2 bags in. And so they just round all those numbers. And so they're not weighing anything. The worst, and then on top of it, I've studied this because I do this kind of thing, but I used to weigh bags, hundreds and hundreds of bags of clay. And I would find bags that would be anywhere from 46 pounds to 54 pounds. Literally an
Yep.
8-pound swing inside bags of
from
clay.
the manufacturer, from the mining company. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So it just becomes this sort of sloppy thing. But then it could be mixed poorly. They could have, one of the classic ones is the pug mills. They don't clean the pug mills. And they say, oh, well, we're mixing your batch of clay with a clay that's just like it. Yeah, it's not. You've got a pug mill that's full of 500 pounds of clay. And that means when they start pushing this new batch through, half of that first ton is probably badly mixed with whatever the previous clay was, which can create all these types of issues. And this is why they have to do better. This is why the clay companies drive me crazy.
So that's why her 1,000 pounds is different from the first one.
Yeah. It could have been the recipe. It could have been the batching, the weighing, the mixing, just all these things. And honestly, I just wish the clay companies would shine some light on this. It's fun. It's funny. We were at NCECA a couple of months ago, and we definitely heard grumbles of some people coming to us and saying we want to do better, and some people we definitely were told of a couple of clay companies slandering our name and saying no, they're wrong. I mean, we had people tell us that they were told that by the clay companies. And yeah, it's really infuriating because like this is 1,000 pounds. Like Tori has to deal with that clay no matter what.
And so she's asking how to adjust her glaze.
Yeah.
So the next 1,000 pounds, she's going to have to adjust her
Adjust
glaze
it back.
back. Or a different way. Or it's I'm sorry, Tori. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's really
I
fun.
know.
We're feeling your frustration, Tori, because
Mhm.
there's a couple of things that it makes it a little bit hard to answer this question because we don't know what's in this particular clay body, right? So we don't know, is it a dark clay body? Is it a stoneware? Is it a porcelain? Is it, whatever. So, there are all those types of problems. Now, you say your matte glazes are bubbling. Matte glazes will tend to do that. So matte glazes are a glaze that grows a crystal network inside a glossy base, assuming it's what we call a true matte glaze. Those do tend to have a greater effect when there is a bubbling condition, because those crystals inside the base, they sort of like form like a quilt, like a network that holds together. And that when something is bubbling in the glass, they will not pop and heal. Like a glossy glaze, they can bubble, and it's really easy for them to pop and heal and hopefully settle back down. With a matte glaze, you're always going to have that network of crystals that's trying to fight against it. And so it can be a big, big problem. You can try to take the kaolin level down in your glaze. Again, if it's a true matte glaze, it's probably got a lot of kaolin, a lot of EPK, whatever in that recipe. If you take that down a bit, I'd say sort of look at the percentage that you've got, and, sort of probably take it down in, sort of 3% increments. If you've got 30, do like a 27, a 24, a 21, sort of take it down a couple of steps. It will definitely decrease the viscosity, which means the glaze will flow more, which it might be able to heal the bubbles any better. But it might not solve the problem, because just the matte glazes, they're always going to have those crystals. And you can't really escape it all that much. So it's definitely a tougher one. And as Rose said, is it worth the effort for that? You might want to just sort of take it on the chin with this one and say, okay, I've got this 1,000 pounds of clay. I know the glossy glazes are working. I'll keep using my glossy glazes on these pots, and go to the clay company. And again, I'm not saying that you should be rude, but if they are the ones making the clay, go to the clay company and say, hey, I am suffering. I'm trying to make pots. I'm trying to get these into people's hands, and I'm losing time and I'm losing money because of something that went on with the clay body. Now, they may be, I don't know, did you test it? It's your responsibility, buyer beware. But say, this is really affecting people's lives. It would be really great if you guys are making changes. Tell the community. You don't have to tell us your recipe, although they should, but just be like, hey, this really affected me. And say, don't go saying like, oh, I want my money back and I want free clay and all that. Say, hey, can you please shine some light on what you're doing? Please, you'll make everybody's lives better. If you have to make a change, we all know this is not news. Custard feldspar went away. Everybody is dealing with the lack of custard feldspar. Honestly, that if I had to place a bet, that's why you're dealing with this. But does the clay companies announce that? No, of course not. They just go like, oh, things happen.
Yeah. And I mean, and I'll kind of give a voice to, we have our recipes for the Harvard Ceramic Studio mixed at a clay supplier in Western Mass, who I won't name, but it's kind of, they're not humongous. They're not a huge company. So there is a little bit more conversation that we have to have. And for example, we had our porcelain recipe. Because V-gum, which was an additive in it, is so expensive, the supplier decided to use bentonite instead. And then, I know. And so
Did
then
they tell you this?
Well, it's a longer story. They told somebody on my staff. So then we get this clay, and we just had the amazing Martha Grover, a very accomplished potter in, and I'm watching, her trim this porcelain, and it felt fine the first day, but by the trimming and putting on handle, it's like you could just walk across the room and hear like bing, 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 and that's all her handles popping off, and she knows what she's doing. So, I had to call and say like, listen, I put the V-gum back in, and it raised the per pound by 20 cents.
Yeah.
So that's huge when I'm buying thousands of pounds of it. But, it's like, those are the conversations that we have to have, because the supplier didn't realize how bad it was to use. Because
we're not naming names, but I need a few more details. Did they made this decision on their own and alerted somebody on your staff? Is that what happened?
Yes.
No, now we've got the depression Matt. Now we've got angry Matt. All right, clay people, if you own a clay company, fess up. Y'all don't know as much as you think you do. Okay. As a materials professional, I've talked to a lot of people at a lot of clay companies. There's some nice people. There's some not nice people. Y'all are not as smart as you think you are. Just because you've made clay doesn't mean you know anything about how clay actually works, because that is a treacherous substitution to make without thoroughly testing it and knowing why and knowing those. But just to go, oh yeah, they're the same. You just switch them. I'll save you some money. No, you don't. Sorry, I know. Angry Matt's not as much fun, but these are the things that drive me crazy.
Man, this is Bummer Matt, Angry Matt.
Bummer Matt, Angry
Lord
Matt.
Celsius.
but I mean, it does on my part, it makes me feel dumb because I didn't catch it, and I didn't know enough to, it's on us too. I know.
But no, it's the same. Yeah. No, like I'm really mad for Tori and for you. You shouldn't have to. You should trust that these people are knowledgeable and that they are taking pride in their work and they're selling a high quality product. That is what it is. You can't just do this because you feel like it or you think it's better or you swear you know. And let's be clear. All the people with decades of experience, all the clay splainers, that doesn't mean you know anything. I once went to a clay company and this guy who was their tech didn't know who I was. And he spent an hour clay splaining at me. And I left with my friend afterwards. And she just said to me, she's like, what just happened? And I said, well, he doesn't know who I am, but that was the biggest load of BS I've ever heard. But boy, he sounded like he knew what he was talking about. But it affects people's lives, their livelihood, their work. Okay. This is me being nice.
Okay, next question.
All right.
Sorry,
Let's
Tori.
all
You
take
got
a-
Bummer and
I
Angry
know,
Matt.
boy. See what you started, Tori. Jeez. All right. So our next question is a text question. You know how much I love to read. And this is Jess from Washington. And Jess wrote in and said, I checked the safety data sheets from my clay supplier and discovered my clay body contains manganese. I always wear gloves when handling the darker clays, but after listening to your podcast episode on silicosis, I'm wondering, how concerned should I really be about manganese exposure in clay? Is this something I should just toss out entirely? Should I rage throw it away? I've been testing glazes and got curious about safety. There's talk about a potter who passed away from heavy metal poisoning, and some folks want to ban manganese in studios. What was that like?
Oh my gosh.
Like Megadeth? Or my dark clay body has manganese, and while I wear gloves, I'm concerned about your silicosis episode. Should I be worried about manganese and clay? Is it time to toss it? Well,
I
let
know
me
we were
tell
calling
you.
everybody down with our silicosis talk.
Yeah, I thought it was really quite positive, our silicosis episode. But anyway, I will shout out for manganese. If anybody should be dead, I have used so much black underglaze with manganese and, done questionable things, eaten ham sandwiches while I'm
Questionable.
painted. I mean, I'm not, now that I'm older, I can admit these things, the folly of my youth. But I'm still here.
Yeah.
No,
Sure, I think
Jess.
we're all still here.
Yeah. Boy, this is one of the classics, man. The fear mongers. I mean, like I said, I think our silicosis, I don't know if just thinking of another conversation, we are very much that silicosis is not the threat that people make it out to be. Not that it's not a threat, but it's not what people portray. And I have exactly the same thing to say about manganese. The fear mongering about manganese is completely unplaced. There is nothing wrong with manganese. It's fine. It's totally fine. No, you shouldn't rage quit it. And everyone
Rage throw it away? No.
But you can go ahead and bring this episode and play the. Okay, ready? I'm good. Rose, do you want to make the announcement that for everybody in the studio, it's fine. It's fine. Calm down, everybody. Just you can tell. Everyone in Jess's studio.
Yeah, it's so okay. One, manganese is not water soluble. So it doesn't go through your skin.
Nope.
It doesn't get absorbed into your body through your skin. It's just gonna sit in the water and not do anything.
Your skin is your barrier against the world. And what Rose is saying is a huge deal. Just because you are touching a powder to your skin does not mean you absorb it. Okay. It has to be water soluble to penetrate the membrane that is your skin. Manganese dioxide, manganese carbonate, manganese oxide, they are not water soluble. Touching them does not. Jess, you don't even have to wear gloves with it. Okay. It is not a problem.
Oh, it probably will like discolor your fingernails. So I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I don't blame you if you want to wear
Totally.
gloves. So
Gloves as a fashion statement, just all the time.
I mean, isn't that what they do in the movies is like to make the people look sickly? They put like dark lines around their cuticles and their
right,
teeth.
Well, what do you think the story about the potter who passed away from heavy metal poisoning, and some folks want to ban manganese in the studios? I used to hear that myth about copper, and the guy who used all the copper glazes and his hair fell out because he used
Oh,
them
I haven't
every
heard
day.
that one.
Oh, that was from like the early 90s, so you probably didn't hear it, Rose.
I mean, again, I love that. And this is just Jess's message, but I almost guarantee that, it's the story of that one guy. We all know that one guy who that totally happened to. If I had to bet money on it, they're talking about Hans Koper. And that Hans Koper is an artist who did die at an unfortunately young age. He died in his late 50s or early 60s, I believe. And Hans Koper was known for having a lot of fake bronzes, which are a high manganese glaze, and a lot of manganese rubs and washes on his pots.
And they're beautiful.
Beautiful. Amazing.
They're
pots.
beautiful.
When I was a student, everyone was looking at Hans Koper. And now I've asked my students the last couple of years, they have no idea who he is. But Hans Koper, he worked with Lucy Rhee a lot. Beautiful work.
Sad.
Yeah. But he did die at an unfortunate young age. The problem is, everyone assumes that because Hans Koper worked with a lot of manganese and Hans Koper died at a young age of a condition that I'll talk about here, that he died from working with manganese. He absolutely did not die from working with manganese. Hans Koper had ALS, okay, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, ulterior lateral sclerosis, okay? And the problem is ALS has exactly the same physical symptoms as a condition called manganism, okay? And manganism is a disease you can get from exposure to manganese. But there is a difference, okay? To be exposed to manganese in a toxic variety to get manganism, you have to be exposed to manganese vapor, okay? Here's the problem. Manganese does not form manganese vapor until 2061 degrees Celsius. That's like 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Whoa.
Okay. So is manganism a real disease? Absolutely. It is. No doubt about it. Who gets manganism? Welders. Get
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Rose.
Welders do.
Okay.
Because a welding torch could be 3,000 degrees. And the welders, they're hanging out on top of the metal and they're heating it fast and it vaporizes and they breathe it. It is an absolute condition. Now, the problem is that ALS and manganism have the same physical symptoms. Where's my list here? In fact, where is it? Neurological symptoms. I hate to do this from the Wikipedia for manganism. Reduced response speed, irritability, mood changes, compulsive behaviors. I have manganism.
Oh, wait,
I do
yeah,
too.
I was gonna say that sounds like me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
With protracted exposure, resemble those of idiopathic Parkinson's disease, which is often misdiagnosed, although there are particular differences in the symptoms, but can also have tremors and behavior like that. Symptoms are also similar to Lou Gehrig's disease and multiple sclerosis. So those are 4 different diseases: manganism, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's, and MS. All have the same physical symptoms, all have completely different causes. And so people see someone like Hans Koper having ALS and then having worked with manganese, and they assume that it's manganese. And I will say, do not go on the internet and look at this, because one thing that drives me crazy, there is a post on a major ceramics website that has an article that is professionally irresponsible. And in that article, the author says, I have manganese poisoning and I worked in ceramics and here's my story. And when you read the story literally begins with basically saying, I went from doctor to doctor to doctor and I didn't stop until I found the doctor who told me I had the manganese poisoning I told him I had. That's called doctor shopping, everyone. And that's not how medicine works. If you go to your doctor and say, I'm afraid of that I've been working in ceramics, working with manganese, your general practitioner doesn't know what manganese symptoms are. They're going to go to Dr. Google. And they're going to come up with this irresponsible article that's just going to feed their bad information. But there is no correlation between manganism and working in ceramics. None, zero whatsoever. Okay. And you just get all this fear mongering and nobody bothering to read the science. But is manganism a real condition? Yes. You have to fire your ceramics over cone 42. 2061 degrees is over.
I do that all the time.
The time.
I accidentally go to 43 sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I tape a 4 and a 2 together and I fire to that.
Fire once to cone 4 and once to cone 2. But yeah, it's one of those things, everybody. Like, I know everyone wants to be safe, and I know people are afraid of working with minerals and chemicals and all these types of things, but it's not what it's made out to be. It really, really isn't. But everybody hangs around the studio and they talk about the guy who died and all this, and like, it's not. Like, please just do a little bit of research. Because yeah, it's definitely one of those things, and you hear about it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've all learned something very, very important today. That heavy metal does not kill necessarily. So rock on, everyone. Okay, Matt and Rose, that is all the time we have for this episode. So until next time.
See you, Kathy.
Well, folks, that's it for this week's episode of For Flux Sake. I'd like to thank the listeners who submitted questions this week. And if you want your question answered on the show, shoot us an email at ForFluxSakePodcast@gmail.com. So join us next time. And when in your studio, remember what Rose always says.
Always remember to test, test, test. This is a test of the emergency glaze system. Beep. This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.